Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Boye, and I'm very excited to be taking you through this webinar today on how to take stunning photos from your smartphone. And I've got a little poll in place, so I'll leave that going for a little bit. We'll check back in after I kind of do my introduction. So if you haven't answered the poll, please do. And yeah, let's get right into things. Oh. All right, so I'm very excited to share with you how to take stunning photos from your smartphone. Now, before I get started, I'd like to share a little bit about my story. So that's me on the left there with my very first camera, a Kodak disc. I don't know if any of you remember that, but the film was like in a disc shape, and I just remember how much I loved using my camera. So I've been taking photos since I was a little kid. I did grow up in a home where both my parents were amateur photographers. We had a dark room in several of our homes, actually. And, I was the only one when I went to summer camp at 10 that had an actual camera. Everyone else had disposable cameras. So I really loved that, getting the film and developing it and all those things. But of course, it was a very different time for photo taking. Then we got into digital cameras. We were one of the first families to have digital cameras. I remember how, you could put like 12 photos on your card, but at least you could delete them and take more. So I definitely got into the digital camera thing for some time, very loyal Canon family. And then I got to a point kind of around the time my daughter was born when I started taking photos with my phone. And that was around the Samsung 4. So I've really been loyal to Samsung. I've actually never owned an iPhone, although my husband and my daughter, she has an older iPhone that she uses. So I've really been, focused on Android for all this time. And I started taking photos with my phone because I just didn't want to carry my camera and my phone with me. And even though I had a really small, like an ELF camera, which was a great camera at the time, when I got my phone, the 6 version, my phone was taking better photos than my camera, and it was one less thing to carry around with me. So I really made the switch and started taking more photos with my phone. Now, of course, the advantage of that is that you can take photos wherever you are and do it quickly and just capture the moments. And that's amazing. But then when I moved to Vancouver Island, I really wanted to start taking better quality photos because of the environment where we are, which is just so incredible. And so I started to learn how to use the tool that I had in my hand. So the first year that I was here, I had my Samsung 8, so the 8 version of my camera, and I used it. I'll actually, most of the pictures behind me were taken with that one, with the 8, and then I upgraded to the 10 about a year ago now. So I've learned skills that whether you have the best phone camera or not, I can still teach you how to take great photos with the phone that you have in your pocket. Okay. So I'm going to stop share for a moment. I'm just going to check in on the poll and I'll end the poll. Okay, so we've got kind of a 60-30 split from Android to iPhone today. And interesting, so everybody has a camera, another camera as well. And quite a few of you are new to this. So that's fantastic. Great. Well, I hope I can share things for those that are really experienced, but also for those that are learning this for the first time, that you'll learn something from the webinar. Okay, so over the next 30 minutes, you're going to learn the number one tip for amateur photographers, how to make your composition more interesting, why you need to squat, and then my top 3 quick takeaways. If you have questions while I'm going, there's a little Q&A, and you can just put your questions in Q&A, and then I'll answer them all at the end. That way, I might have already answered your question, who knows, but you feel free to put your questions in at any time. Okay, so my number one tip is to straighten the horizon. So this is the biggest thing that makes the difference between an amateur and a professional photographer, is the horizon being straight. Now, that being said, you can see the difference. These pictures were taken moments apart. The one on the left, the horizon is straight. The one on the right, it is not, because I was trying to catch the bird in it, so I moved. When you have a camera, often the camera has a level or some lines that really help you with straightening the horizon. Now, did you know that your phone camera also has grid lines? So this is one of the best tips that I can share is to turn on the grid lines for your camera. So the left-hand one or the white one, that is if you have an Android phone. So if you have an Android phone, I want you to grab your phone right now and I want you to do this while we're on the webinar because I think it's really important for us to, just set it up properly right now. If you're on an iPhone, it's the dark one. That was my husband's phone. So in for an Android phone, you can reach the camera settings from your camera. So you open your camera, you click on the little gear, open the settings and scroll down and just turn grid lines on. On an iPhone, the camera settings are in settings. So you have to go into settings into your phone, scroll down till you find camera, then within camera, scroll down under composition and turn the grid on. Okay. So just like raise your hand or put a note in the chat so that I know that you have done that. Okay. So you've set that up with your phone. You can do that even if you're watching this webinar from your phone. Okay, so that is number one tip, straighten the horizon. Now this can be done in editing, and that's something that I would teach in a more elaborate workshop is what you can do in the editing process to straighten the horizon, but it's always easier. My goal when I take photos is to do the least amount of editing afterwards. I want to take the best photos first. Now, does that mean that every photo is good? Absolutely not. You can see right there, two photos, couple moments apart, one, the horizon is quite crooked. But my goal is to set up the shot properly first and then do a little bit of editing afterwards. It can take so much time and effort to do the editing, so it's actually easier to take a better photo first. And that's really what I'm going to teach you is just taking better photos first so that yeah, we can do a little bit of editing, but it's not going to take up a ton of your time. Okay. My favorite composition tip is putting something between you and the horizon. So I know my friend Lori knows this one because she's been out for a few sunrises with me before. Whether you're capturing the sunrise, whether you're capturing any kind of landscape, you're out in the forest, putting something between you and the horizon makes it a little bit more interesting. So these are all taken on the same day. The one in the middle, right? That's a sunrise and it's pretty. And here's the thing, the sunrise itself is really beautiful, but if you're always, which is a good tip, going to the same spots, it kind of gets repetitive and less creative. So you want to put something between you and the horizon. So a tree is a really good idea. You've seen me do images with feathers, rock stacks, whatever it is to, first of all, it's a really good strategy to be able to block the sun as it's rising to avoid lens flare. I'll show you. So this one on the left, this is actually, so this can happen with your camera and you'll see like a streak and it's called lens flare. With your phone camera, one thing to pay attention to is you want to keep like a glasses cloth. So this is my glasses cloth or sunglass cloth nearby because just wiping your camera, please don't use your fingertips on this. Okay, just wiping it can make a huge difference. So what happened on the left, this was really one of my earlier photos when I first started really taking photos. It's really beautiful, but that line, which is cool and I like it, but that was because the camera lens itself was dirty. So that's what caused that effect. And if you want to avoid, if you've ever seen those like those blue dots or like the weird people are like, oh, there's like angels in your photos. I'm like, no, it's just lens flare. So whenever you're taking photos into the sun at any time of day, that lens flare can really show up. So putting the sun behind the tree, like in this picture here, you see how the sun is like right behind the tree. So that way it's not giving the same lens flare. Okay. And then I mentioned the feather. This feather photo, this was like a composition dream. So my friend who's another photographer, he had found this like half log that we were able to tilt up. And then I had found a feather on the beach and I remembered like moving the feather in different directions and angles to see how I could block the sun. This photo really is quite epic because like the sun dripping down the feather and the light just coming through and then there's enough light to light up the little details on the log, like all these little things that, to be honest, at the time I didn't really know about composition. I actually want to say that I got quite lucky with this photo because everything just kind of lined up and it just worked out really well. So this is what's fun too, is like when you practice putting something between you and the horizon, it helps your creativity and it just helps you to have a good time and have fun. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is changing your angle. So this is where I said that it's really important to be able to squat. So I want you to think about, are you taking a yoga class right now? Are you stretching? Are you able to squat down? Because that can really help to create incredible photos. So this is a picture of me, my friend Wally. Wally is another photographer friend of mine. We often meet up at the beach. He uses a traditional camera. He actually has several different cameras that he uses, and I stick to my phone. Here's the thing, friends. I want you to know and understand that it's okay for you to use your camera to take all of your photos. Any camera that's an 8 version or better, because I think we're on version like 12 in some cameras, anything that's an 8 or above. So an iPhone 8, a Samsung 8, whatever Note 8 that you're using. Although the Google, if you have a Google, I don't know if anybody has a Google camera. I didn't really ask, but the Google Pixel 3 takes really great photos as well. That was one that I looked at. Um, you can capture really incredible photos with your phone, and you don't necessarily need to invest into a camera. If you've invested in a good phone, which is about the cost of a good camera, my phone is a $1,500 phone. I'm using my phone for all the other things that I use it, but I'm also using it for my camera. One really nice thing about the Samsung phone that I have, it has a wide angle, and it does really create these amazing landscapes that I wouldn't have otherwise if I didn't have the wide angle. But I'm going to tell you a secret. I generally don't use my wide angle that much anymore. I really stick to really simple phone settings. So, in order to get, for example, these wave splashes, which is one of my favorite things to capture, um, you have to be down at the level of where the log is. And then you have to kind of move to where the sun is. Sometimes you can catch the sun behind the waves. On the one on the right, you can see the waves weren't as high as the sun, but the color was really rich because the sun hadn't completely breached the horizon as well. So when you change the way that you're sitting, sometimes you can sit. The beach is often wet, so I'm not usually sitting down. Sometimes I'll get lucky and I'll be able to sit on on another log and catch the angle. But generally speaking, there is a lot of squatting going on. So another thing to think about when you're changing your angle is getting up above things, right? So where can I climb safely? Not, please don't climb trees. I don't recommend that. But climbing up above the escarpment, looking down at things can really change the angle. Or one of my favorites is when you're walking in the forest to kind of look up and look at the canopy, right? So instead of just pointing your phone straight ahead, looking in different directions. And I will tell you, one of the hardest things about capturing wave photography is the fact that the horizon, it's really hard to keep the horizon straight and also tap the button when the wave is at the good point. So this is an exception to the rule of taking a lot of photos. As I said earlier, you want to take fewer photos and in just to have set up your composition ahead of time. But when you're doing splash photography, you're likely going to have to take more photos because you actually have to tap on your camera before the splash happens. So that definitely takes a lot of practice. So those are like my three big, changes you can make to your photography to be really comfortable using your phone. And I'm going to share some things that are like takeaway things that you can do right now that will really help as well. So this is a big one. I have a question for you. So I want you to answer in the chat. When was the last time you backed up the photos on your phone? So yes, no, or never. Just let me know in the chat. You can be honest. I won't judge. Okay. All right. Okay, great. So that's really good. So Maria says they go automatically onto Google. That's fantastic. That's actually the idea, is that to have your phone camera, your phone images connected directly to a cloud server. Because let me tell you, I use Dropbox. I pay for a Dropbox. For me, it's a really good investment. I take up to 2,000 photos a month with my phone. It's a lot. You can tell what months didn't have a lot of sunrises because the photos will be around 1,200. So I do take a lot of photos, and they're often in a morning. Depending on the morning, I'll take about 100 photos, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't because I'm there for over an hour. So okay, so those that said not recently, so you definitely want to do that today. And if you've never backed up your phone photos, so this is really, really important, is to have a way to back up your photos. Okay, so Dropbox is that's what I use. Google, you likely will have to pay for Google if you're taking a lot of photos. An SD card works with an Android phone. If you have an iPhone, you can't add an SD card. So I thought an SD card was a great idea because it adds more storage to your phone. But this happened to me. My SD card just stopped working. I've actually never really had that happen. SD card is the little, the teeny ones for your phone, or the old ones we used to put in our cameras. I've rarely had one that stopped working, but it does happen. And once your SD card stops working, you cannot access what's on there anymore. So my SD card just stopped working out of nowhere. So thankfully, I had already been updating everything to Dropbox on a regular basis. I'm going to give you another little trick for when you're putting your photos on the cloud. So I put my photos in a folder by month. And then once the year is over, I put the whole every month into a yearly folder. And that really helps me to kind of let's say a Facebook memory comes up and I want to go back and maybe print a photo. It really makes it easier to find where and when that photo was. So that is just a great way. Like if you just have a huge, I don't know, Maria, if you're organizing your photos in that Google, but if you just have years and years and years of photos and no organization, you're never going to be able to find a photo again if you do decide you want to print it or share it in a different way. Okay, so that's really important. So I'm sure everyone's going to just let me know and make, if you haven't been backed up, just say yes, you'll take care of that today. The number two is that the composing before shooting. So why is this important? This is how you become a better photographer. Okay, whether you have a phone in your hand or you have a camera in your hand, composition is what really sets you apart from, once in a while photographer to becoming a more professional photographer. Do I consider myself a professional photographer? No, this is not my profession. It is a hobby business that I now do but I love to share my images. And this composition before shooting, what happens is the more you practice composition, the better your pictures get. I look back at the pictures that I took when I first moved to Vancouver Island. There's a lot of crooked horizons. There's a lot of lens flares. It doesn't mean they're not good pictures. Here's the interesting thing. Most people actually, if you take a decent picture and even if the horizon's crooked and you have lens flare, most people will really like that. And they'll give you lots of, compliments and feedback. For me, I wanted to go beyond that. I wanted to really learn and understand how I could make photos that took people's breath away. It took my own breath away. And that's where I've gone with my photography. The last thing that I think is a really important thing to understand about photography is to learn by watching. So what this means is that you can learn from other photographers. So as you know, I take a lot of sunrise photography, and I do run into other people at the beach. I've made friends with some photographers that I see on a regular basis, and I will learn by watching where they take a photo. It's interesting. Just a little sidebar about tripods. So I was going to mention that with the wave photography. I used to put my phone on a little tripod to help with the wave photography. And the reason I stopped doing that is that it is harder because then you have to if you're trying to get a wave, then you're literally going to be lying on your stomach to be able to see the camera, right, with the tripod. So that's actually something to be aware of. A photographer with a camera can put their camera down flat and still press the shutter, right? I shouldn't say that. You can get a remote shutter for your phone, but generally if I put my phone down, it's going to tip over, right? So then I have to bring a tripod. Well, I started bringing a tripod, but then I had another piece of equipment to carry and it doesn't work for the wide angle and I had to take my case off. So I stopped worrying about taking the tripod. Now, a lot of photographers with cameras will take their tripod out and set themselves up on a spot and just go for it. That's not my kind of photography. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just different. Right. So you have to find the type of photography that you like, and learning by watching other photographers is really helpful. Like that's why I started using a tripod, because I saw other photographers doing it and realized it just wasn't going to work for me. The other way to learn by watching is to watch other people, like look at other people's photos, right? So thinking about like this one here, this was my friend, one of my photographer friends, George. He, put together this little rock stack and we played with it. Like we played with where the light was coming through, and I learned from him, and I just learned different ways. Like that's what's cool. I know people who have done feather photography because they saw me doing the feather. That's awesome. The only thing that I will say about composition is that if someone's done like a really specific composition and setup, doing the exact same thing and not giving them credit is not cool, right? So even though no two pictures will look alike, if you're inspired by somebody's composition, it's so nice to refer back to that photographer. Much like a lot of creative work, I mean, it's really hard to protect our photography. I guess I could add that to my takeaways is that if you're sharing your photos on social media, at least put your name on them. My name just goes on them. I'm not saying people can't cut them out and steal them. Of course they can, but I can't control that. But at the very least, I can put my name on the image, and then that way that really helps because people can actually know where it came from. So before we go into the Q&A, I wanted to just share with you this story of this picture. And this is why, for me, it became really important to become a better smartphone photographer. So this was only about a month or two after I moved to Vancouver Island. And I was driving to the beach in the early morning. I was driving out to Piper's Lagoon, those who know where that is. And I could see that the whole sky was red. And so if I can see that the sky is red from the road, I know that what's happening on the horizon is really stunning, because it's, it doesn't usually get to Hammond Bay Road. So I normally can't see it. So I knew it. And I could see this like red sky, and I'm racing. Thankfully, there were no deer, no police, to the beach to get to the horizon as soon as I possibly could. And I remember stepping out of my car, and I was by myself, and it was still really dark, but it was red, like a red like I've never seen before or since. And I remember standing on that beach and just crying with gratitude, like for this moment that I got to capture. And I took as many photos as I could. I didn't have the same skill set I do today, but I still remember when I see the photos from that morning, it still just brings me back to this like tremendous moment of gratitude. And for me, that's what a photo can do, right? Is it can just evoke an emotion and a memory. And for me, one of the biggest joys that I get from my photography is sharing it with others. Not because I want you to comment or like it or whatever, which is always lovely, but I want to give you a little piece of what I got to see today. And that's what is so wonderful about this era of smartphone photography is you can be anywhere at any time, capture a photo and bring someone into that world. And what I've written here is probably the biggest lesson that can help you with your photography is you can't catch them all. So I am a sunrise photographer, and I don't catch them all. I missed one this morning. It was beautiful. My friend, Wally, messaged me. He's like, it was so beautiful. I'm like, yeah. And I needed to sleep. So I slept, right? There's going to be times when you get to the beach and you've just missed the light. There's going to be times when you saw a deer right in front of you and you pull your camera out and everything's crooked and blurry and you weren't able to get a good shot. There's going to be times when your phone battery dies and you can't even catch the photo. There's going to be times when you had a streak on the back of your lens and you didn't even know it until you got home. And that's okay. I think it's just so important for us to give ourselves so much grace um, when we are taking photos. Okay, so friends, those are my favorite simple tips to help you with smartphone photography. My email, it's juliecmboye at gmail.com. I am offering a full 2-hour workshop where we're going to go into a lot more detail. We're going to talk about a lot more things about using your phone to take photography. Hopefully, we're going to have time to touch into some editing. I'll teach you the things that I do for editing. And I'll teach you really like this, all the settings that I use and all of the things that go into doing the photography, including like how to read your weather apps and all of those things. If you don't live on Vancouver Island, I'm going to teach you how to find the sunrise in your area. So all those things. Or if you just want to chat a little bit more about, smartphone photography, you can send me an email. Or if we're connected on Facebook Messenger, I know a lot of you found me through Facebook Messenger. I'm happy to connect that way. So we do have about 4 minutes left. So I'm open to answering some of your questions that you have about smartphone photography. So if you have a specific question, just type it into the chat or into Q&A and I'll take care of you. I'm going to pause the recording here. So for those that are watching the recording, oh, there we go.